Hello, this is called Art, Questing, and the Creative Process, how making a painting is like making a life. So I'd like to talk to you today about the creative process. And because I personally can't listen very well without something to write or draw with in my hand, I encourage you to pause the video for a minute, grab something to write or draw with if you're the same way or if you choose to. So this piece was originally written as a homily for the First Parish of Unitarian Universalist Church of Watertown and offered on Sunday, July 24th, 2022. And I offer it to a broader audience in case it's of help and use to you. And forgive me if I read it so that I can stay a little bit true to the original idea. So I do believe that everyone's creative and that creativity takes many forms. And I also believe that the creative process has a lot of similarities to the art of living. So I hope that what I have to say will resonate with you, whether or not you consider yourself creative and wherever you are on your life's path. So I've been making art since childhood. I had two grandmothers who painted, one self-taught and the other a graduate of Portland School of Art. So I kind of always felt like I had no choice but to become a visual artist. Looking back, I now believe that the ability to see the world as a painting was only part of the legacy I inherited from my grandmothers. I got to witness their perseverance to keep at it, no matter what others said, no matter what life things got in the way, they kept painting and drawing. And I was fortunate to accompany my grandma Kennedy to some of the painting classes she taught at senior centers in and around Portland, Maine. And for participants, those classes were only partly about learning to paint. More importantly, in some ways, they were about sharing coffee and donuts and about building community and trading stories about life's ups and downs. There have been times in my life when I've chosen visual art over other pursuits, and times that I've set it aside for other more, quote, practical, lucrative forms of education and work. And where my own path has led me today is a combination of drawing and painting, facilitation, and visual thinking. In business settings, I help make big ideas visible through words, pictures, and diagrams. I paint to keep myself grounded and sane. Well, more grounded and more sane anyway. So next, I'd like to show you an example of my own creative process. But first, being part artist, part educator, I'd like to introduce you to a simple 5-step method for how to make any painting. First, make the canvas not blank. Make a mark, a blob, a background, some texture, anything to start getting some momentum moving. Step 2, listen for the nudge. Some urge drew you to make this thing that you're about to make. Close your eyes for a second and see if one piece of the puzzle becomes clear, and clear enough anyway to act on, to take that first step. Step 3, write down the bones. Narrow down your composition, your big idea, to 3 to 5 major shapes or lines and put them down quickly. Put them down big and at least fill the available space and run off the sides. Step 4, work from back to front, light to dark. Things we see in the distance usually appear a little more muted and have less contrast. Objects in the foreground, close up, tend to have sharper edges and greater differences between lights and darks. Now, every painting is different and every painter may have a different approach, but in general, I find this to be a good, fairly universal starting point. Step 5, respect your work. There may just be a reason why this nudge chose you to bring it to life. Don't put it down, don't doubt it, trust the process and give it a chance. Now, I'd like to tell you about the evolution of this painting behind me, which some of you may have seen. This was displayed during the talent show at First Parish, for example. And it's been in a couple of shows recently that I've participated in. Now, for those of you who may not be able to see the painting next to me very well, it has a square canvas divided into 4 quadrants. The whole canvas is 20 by 20 inches. And each quadrant contains a close-up section of a different tree with spring flower blossoms on it. So I love spring. It's the season in which I was born, and I particularly love those tender blossoms that appear on the trees, at least here in New England where I live in the early spring, just after the snowdrops and crocuses have kind of signaled that winter is finally ending and there's hope of warmer weather on the way and longer days of sunshine. For years, I used to visit trees in bloom and try painting them in person. I tried painting these spring blossoms. I tried many times and failed. I couldn't seem to get the way the sun shines through some petals and casts shadows on others. It was too complex and too subtle for me to capture, even with my camera at the time. And the blossoms seemed to open so quickly. If I didn't get back to that one tree for a week, for example, the whole picture would have changed. Now, I carried this same feeling every spring like an itch I just couldn't scratch, or like this beautiful moment would disappear forever if I couldn't capture it in paint. A strong wind or rainstorm might actually wash all those blossoms away, and the moment would be gone. Each spring, I would paint, I would fail, and I would learn a little bit more. In 2020, when our world slowed to a screeching halt due to the COVID-19 pandemic, I found myself with a much emptier calendar, fewer obligations, at least in theory, and zero travel time as the kids' school and my work moved to Zoom meetings. I started a pay-as-you-can weekly gathering of creatives that I called Friday Flow and invited everyone on my email list from my studio, from past painting classes, friends, relatives to come paint, draw, write, or just breathe with me for 2 hours once a week on Zoom. It's still going, and it's a weekly play date for creativity. It's been so great for me. Having to show up and make something every week has energized my painting and given me a sense of grounding. And I've heard others voicing the same. Doing this in community with other people has helped me push through and finish this painting and provided really helpful feedback. The Zoom format is actually what gave me inspiration for the layout of this painting. I already had a stack of 20 by 20 inch canvases, and looking at the square format, I kind of imagined dividing the canvas into 4 equal squares and then populating each with a close-up of a different tree with these spring blossoms on it. One of my students actually uses grids in her work, which also contributed to the idea. So the canvas had been pre-painted with a rust color that I find really useful. It helps to eliminate the white because a blank white canvas can be kind of intimidating, and the rust color adds warmth. When I taped off the grid, I knew that there would be this single color revealed later that I could choose to keep or change. So next step, I painted a very loose abstract blue sky with clouds across the whole canvas so that there would be a sense of unity between the squares. And in Friday Flow, at that point, more than one participant thought the painting could have been considered finished at that stage. And then I was faced with a choice between 2 paths at that moment. Follow my initial idea or call it done and start another painting. I had to do what I call the dance, or listening to the canvas. I had to step back, check in with my original idea, and really see what I had actually done so far and decide which path to follow next. I chose to paint right over the finished sky. It felt like a bold leap though, so to build my confidence first, I used a soft vine charcoal to sketch the main shapes of the branches and blossoms. It comes in a box like that, and this is what it looks like with some vine charcoal. It's very soft and easy to erase those lines afterward. So this idea of sketching down the main shapes and branches and blossoms, that's what I mean by putting down the bones. So next, once I had the rough sketches, I worked in each square more or less one at a time sequentially, doing some back and forth between them. In general, I like to work from background to foreground and light to dark, and I block in colors gradually with the deepest, darkest colors added after I'm fairly confident that things are in the right place. Acrylic paint covers more quickly and easily if you start with thinner coats and add darker colors over light. But you'll see painters work in lots of different ways. During this process, again, I had to do the dance between following my initial idea versus responding to what appeared on the canvas. For example, in the magnolia corner, I had intended to add a lot more blossoms in the background, but after the foreground was done, it felt like it had said enough, so I stopped. And somehow zooming also helped me finally finish this painting. As my work meetings and socializing were almost all moving to Zoom, I had to learn how to really pay attention and engage people in new ways on Zoom. At the same time, I felt like this painting was reflecting the same reality. Zooming in close to each tree and cropping each square as if it were a portrait made it possible for me to really spend the time to learn about each tree and blossom, to the point where I grew to love them all and finally felt like I could do them justice through paint. So it took me almost 2 years to complete this painting off and on, with other projects and paintings kind of interspersed. When I finally removed the tape that had created this safe boundary between each of the squares, there was that rust color that no longer worked at all with the painted squares, plus a sticky layer of masking tape that did not want to come off. So this timing also coincided, coincidentally, with the time that people were beginning to finally interact in person more, tentatively removing those masks in some situations, but still remaining really cautious. Again, art imitated life. How was I going to get these 4 trees to relate? How are we supposed to reconnect friends, family members, and colleagues who've become so used to keeping their distance? How might I honor the individuality of each tree and each participant, and also guide them to feel like parts of a whole? So after a couple of weeks of thinking about it, my solution for the painting came out of my experience making digital art. I opted to create this simple beveled edge using a light, medium, and dark tone. And these 3 tones are repeated in each corner. And that kind of gives the illusion of light and shadow on a raised frame or a shared container of sorts. It is actually flat, even though it looks raised. So that's the story of the creative process that led to this painting, which I call Family Reunion, and some of the things that it's taught me. I hope some of what I have shared has been helpful or thought-provoking for you, whether in thinking about your own art making, maybe about the learning path that you're on, or perhaps even in your spiritual journey. For me, creativity flows from a divine source through my heart and hands and into the world. I feel like my job is to listen well and not get in my own way too much. And when I experience what I think of as good art, whether it's mine or someone else's, the work seems to tap into this universal thread or vein of truth that goes way beyond language, beyond culture, and beyond time. To come back to this simple 5-step method for how to make any painting, or in other words, how to live a life. Let's recap. Step 1, make the canvas not blank. Paint a background and start with the sky, dirt, water, whatever. Take a first step, as in life, learn from it, try something new, experience and grow. Step 2, listen for the nudge. The question, what should I paint? Or who should I be? Is maybe too big. How about just starting with what comes next? That's big enough. Step 3, as author Natalie Goldberg's book for aspiring writers says, write down the bones. In painting, that means say what you're trying to say in a few big, bold shapes and lines. In other words, pick a general direction to start and just take that first step. You're going to go north, south, east, west. Artist, doctor, teacher. Unitarian Universalist, Methodist, Muslim, Sufi. Explore, pick a direction, see where it takes you. Adjust. Step 4, work from back to front, light to dark. Do the dance with your canvas. Take some fearless steps towards that nudge that brought you there. Step back, see what's actually shown up, and then take the next step. In other words, live like it's your last day of vacation. Say yes, trust that it will all work out. Step 5, respect your work. It's your nudge, so the color, the composition you choose will always be the right one. Share with those you trust, listen, smile, say thank you, and then choose your path. It's your life, so the path that you choose will always end up being the right one. Good luck and let me know how it goes. Look forward to seeing you in a future Friday Flow. Thanks.